Rise and grind, folks. I'm back at the Hive, and I got a special treat for you guys. I found a book that added at least $20,000 worth of service knowledge and maintenance knowledge and overall knowledge, guys. I actually didn't even finish the whole thing. I got about like 3/4 of the way into reading this book at the time. I had this book now for like almost 2 years, but I got like maybe halfway, almost 3/4 into the book, and instantly, guys, I had to apply almost everything I learned. But guys, I had to run to Staples and grab some new filing folders here. But let's go inside and let's get started, shall we? I'll see you in a little bit. All right, guys, I got everything put away in the filing cabinets, and now it's time to have fun, shall we? So let's begin. And for reference, once again, I'm going off Classic Hydronics by Dan Holohan. He made a bunch of different books with hydronics and steam in particular. I didn't get that one. I picked this one up. And this particular one, I think it was like $25 2 years ago on Amazon. Just search his name, and like I said, all his books come up. I know for sure he made one on Steam, as you guys see here. And I definitely recommend his books because his illustrations and his point of views are very, very simple to understand, especially if you guys seen these before, as far as whether it be a steam boiler or a hot water boiler. But he has pictures in his books, and he goes off every single point with illustrations. So it's not just a bunch of words. And like, I know how some books are. Sometimes it can be confusing to understand if they don't relate it to something that you can see. But like I said, one thing I like about, like I said, Dan's books is that he makes it easier to just comprehend with pictures and illustrations. And like I said, guys, especially if this is a bonus, if you guys already seen his equipment, you might not even need the pictures. But like I said, everything here is great. But what I'm going to do, guys, is I just got my sticky notes here. I'm just going to highlight a few chapters because this book is very extensive. But I'm just going to go over a few chapters. And guys, what I do, I'm just going over the table of contents. He starts at the basics with a simple copper elbow, the classics. Chapter 3 is an interview with a dead man. 4 is classic gravity. 5, classic pumping. Chapter 6 is classic 1-pipe. Chapter 7, classic 2-pipe. 8 is classic circulators. 9 is classic temperatures. Classic air problems, classic radiant, and the radiator. Now, I know I didn't get past like the 8th chapter because, guys, like I said, I bought this book like in the summer 2 years ago before it was boiler season. And like I said, guys, I simply related from chapter 1 as far as like with Dan's standpoint, his introduction into HVAC. I think he worked at a supply house. This is over in New York a while back. But like I said, guys, everything is very, very relatable. And since I already had service and boilers, like I said, all this was just icing on the cake. And like I said, I never had someone explain hydronics to me in a way that, like I said, this is just how things were 40 years ago. I didn't have, like I said, relatives or anyone I knew that did HVAC for like 50, 60 years, and I was always interested, like I said, I was always interested in how, equipment worked 80, 90 years ago, because guys, we work in Philadelphia, and I can tell you now, the oldest boiler I've seen is like maybe 40 years, but most of those boilers are getting replaced because you got new homeowners, they want something that's less of an eyesore, they want something that's less noisy. So a lot of older equipment you guys probably are not going to see, but it's still great to understand how things evolved. Nothing new came from like nothing. Everything has, like I said, a preface, whether it be, like I said, something that was here that got discontinued. Everything that you see here, whether it be a gas valve, whether it be a boiler, everything now had something that came before it. And like I said, guys, it's your job as a technician is just to understand where everything came from so you can reference everything, and it allows you to get a better understanding and get more experience with newer equipment, So, all right, guys, what I'm going to do is I am going to I'm going to skip chapter 1. I'm going to go to 2. All right, guys, let's get started here. Chapter 2, the classics. I'm a huge fan of the new stuff. I love condenser boilers and ECM motors on pumps and fans. These things are smarter than I am, and they're not afraid to tell me so. I love the sleek, sexy European radiators that I can't afford to put in my own home, but they do make me drool. I love plastic pipes that bend around corners, and I love controls that want to talk to heating systems from 100 miles away while the building owner is driving 70 miles per hour on the interstate. I'm nuts about all of this new stuff. It's exciting and innovative, and it saves fuel. But from most of what I can see as I wander around America is old trouble and in need of attention. So that's what this book is about. Interesting fact here, guys. Listen to this. Only 11% of American homes have hydronic heat, and that includes steam. Hence, Philadelphia, for you guys that are in Philadelphia or Pennsylvania, only 11%. The folks who manufacture boilers and radiators coined the term hydronics in 1946 to make the science of heating a building with water in any form sound sexy, like electronics, a word that has been with us since the 1900s, but this is all the rage in the post-war years. Most of the classic hydronic systems are older than we are, and they've gone through changes over the years, some of them painful changes. Many of them went in before we knew as much as we knew today about hot water heating. Heck, even if it wasn't until the mid-60s that we figured out where to install the circulator to keep the air from coming out of the solution and stop the piping from flowing. The thing about America, though, is that once we put in a heating system, we tend to keep it as is. I don't think I need the light here. Here we go. Sure, we change our other appliances for fashion's sake, but I've never met anyone who wanted to change her boiler because it's not this year's model or it's the wrong color. Even with today's green, keyword green, consciousness, most customers will rather put solar panels on their roofs and rain barrels on their downspouts rather than get rid of that old boiler that crouches like a forgetting old uncle in their basement. We get excited about new cars, but a new heating system is usually just an unexpected and a certainly unwanted expense. So let's talk about how classic hydronic systems work and how they changed over the years and what we can do right now to get the most out of them without spending a fortune. My goal is to make you see inside these older systems and to be able to do stuff that others say can be done. If I can do that, I will be in a state of bliss and you'll be nodding your head and smiling at your newfound knowledge. I'll tell you some tales along the way, and I hope you enjoy hearing them as much as I enjoy telling. Okay, let's get started. Think of this as a good liberal arts education in hot water heating. I want you to focus on the core principles that make all the hydronic systems work. Things such as temperature difference, what engineers call delta T, and pressure difference, what they call delta P, are two concepts that represent the zen of hydronic heating. And we'll keep coming around to them as we move along our delicious hot water buffet. Keep those core principles on your plate at all times and you'll never go hungry. Delta P creates flow because high pressure goes to low pressure. High to low. Always, when there is no flow, there is no heat. I repeat, when there is no flow, there is no heat. So that's why delta P is on the plate. An air problem and a delta P problem look like identical twins. Since life can be unfair, you'll probably choose the wrong twin when you're troubleshooting. One thing we'll spend a lot of time on is the concept that when you're bleeding a radiator, and if you don't get any air, stop bleeding. If you don't get any air, it ain't an air problem. You know what this means, guys? If you're getting water coming out of a radiator, then that means there's not an air problem. If you don't get any air, then your issue is not the air. It's a balance problem. That's important to know. By glancing back nostalgically at old gravity systems, we can begin to see the essence of delta P, which makes all heating systems work no matter what type. So we'll begin with those. In diverter T systems, maddening as they can be, we see the roots of primary, secondary pumping, which arrived in the 60s, courtesy of the late great Gil Carson, who was my teacher. One pipe systems run the concept of delta T up the flagpole and show us the value of a two-pipe hydronic system. All right, so let's take a time out here, guys. This is where we left off at. I want to show you something here. Anytime I see a bunch of words, especially if I don't understand it, I like to draw pictures for reference. And since I'm doing this, like I said, I'm reading this off. I want to make sure I don't lose you guys. What Dan's basically referring to is a one pipe and a two pipe system. So I pretty much drew what he was explaining. And this is just a basic one pipe, two pipe system. And guys, the biggest difference between a one pipe and a two pipe is supply and return. For you guys that don't know, the supply pipe is the water that comes out the boiler that goes to the radiator, and then the return is the pipe that comes from the radiator to go back to the boiler to get preheated. The biggest advantage of a one pipe system is that you don't need additional pipes. You just have literally one pipe coming from your boiler to one of your radiators. And guys, look at this. The supply from this radiator comes from the boiler, but look, the supply from the other radiator is the return from the existing radiator. It's like one big loop. And guys, this can be very, very great on a small scale, but if you start adding radiators, look at what's going to happen. This first radiator may be 100, and the second one may be 90. Look at what's going to happen if you keep adding more. Because remember, guys, the return from the previous radiator is going to be the supply to the next one. It's not going back to the boiler. So if you keep adding these up, adding these on, now by that 12th radiator, it could be ice cold. So that's the biggest advantage of a one pipe system that you won't have. Well, that's the biggest disadvantage of a one pipe system that you will never have on a two pipe, is that you could run out of hot water on the further radiators, the more radiators you have. So back in the day, you had a lot of one pipe setups, but guys, with two pipes, what you'll have is you'll have headers. You'll have a return and a supply header. So think about a return and a supply header, like you literally have a pipe coming out the boiler and coming back from the boiler, and you have all the hits that's going to each and every radiator coming off each header. So what that means is this is my supply header. My supply side of each radiator has a pipe going straight from it, going right from the supply header. So this is how the water is flowing. It's flowing up, hitting both of the radiators. Radiator does its job. It gives off heat. It gives off the heat to the room, right? And then hot meets cold. Radiator gets cold. House gets warmer. But that colder water from the radiator is going back to the header, which goes back to the boiler. Guys, this setup ensures that each and every radiator gets the same supply temperature, which is great because you can have 20 radiators. Granted that everything's sized properly, you can have 20 radiators on a two-pipe system and it can all get the same temperature. Versus this, if you have 20 radiators, that 20th one might be ice cold, So like I said, guys, it's great to know the difference between these two. A lot of homes that I've seen have two pipes, but you could have had that additional one pipe setup, and there could be nothing wrong with it. Depends on how many radiators you have, so that's good to know. All right, let me put the cap on this before this dries out, and let's get back to the book here. All right, where we left off at. So it says here, let me put the light on there so y'all can see. One pipe loop systems run the concept of delta T up the flagpole and shows us the value of two pipe hydronic systems. Too much baseboard means no heat at the ends of the loop because heat travels on the flow like a passenger on a train. Where there is no heat, there is no happiness. Two pipe systems, keyword this one, lets us deliver about the same temperature water to all the radiators. That is its great advantage over the one pipe system when it comes to those larger buildings here. So it's all about delta T and delta P, the delta sisters. And sorry for turning the light off and on. With the light I can see, but it makes the screen smaller on my end. I'm trying to see the whole page. But yeah, guys, basically to sum it up, two pipe systems, depends on your setup. If you do have, like I just explained, if you do have a bigger setup with more baseboards and radiators, like a larger building, a two pipe will work. Even though if you're doing this from scratch, most likely you'll have a two pipe, but if the existing setup was one pipe, or one pipe can still work, it really depends on how many radiators you'll have, because that will determine what the temperature is going to be on the last radiator, because that's your biggest concern. The first radiator on a one pipe system is always going to be the warmest, but like I said, guys, the further you go along that chain, you could risk. And sorry, guys, my voice is been acting up since yesterday. But guys, the further you go, like I said, down the chain on the one pipe setup, it could cause the furthest radiators on that chain to get cold. So that's why you have to be real careful with which setup you choose. All right, moving along here. Classic Radiant begin on Long Island, and I have some very good stories to tell you about those. I think you'll enjoy them. But let's begin at the beginning and let's see where it all takes us. I promise to do my best to make this a fun trip. And oh, just so you know, a simple copper elbow is sitting right here on my desk. All right, and this is the interview with a dead man. We're going to skip this chapter. And here he's talking about a classic gravity boiler. But this is giving you a preface on where the gravity boiler started. And this is a very, very good chapter to read off of. But guys, even right now, I only read one chapter. And he pretty much tells you in a nutshell what used to be and what you guys will see now and what the difference is. So this is definitely a great source, like I said, of information for you guys if you're getting into hydronics, or if you guys do already, service and install hydronics. Just give you reference points, and this can also keep you sharp with what you're going to see down the line. Because in Philadelphia, guys, I definitely did see at least 3 or 4 gravity boilers. And right now, guys, with the new systems, we're putting circulator pumps on these boilers, so you're not going to see as much gravity systems as what used to be out there back in the day. But still, guys, it's always great to understand what things were before, so you'll have a better understanding. Because, guys, they may replace the heating system, but the house is still 100 years old. So if you knew what the setup was like on these older gravity boilers and you see a new system, you can step back and say, wait, now I understand why this bedroom up here, and I'm just using my hands hypothetically, guys. I can say, okay, I can step back and say, okay, I see you got this hot water boiler replaced 10 years ago. But you see this valve here, and now I see why this bedroom never got hot. Because once XYZ replaced the boiler, they never did anything with the header. And that header was size XYZ. That's why, like I said, guys, only $30. Like I said, $25. This is a great investment. Make sure you guys invest in your training, invest in your knowledge. So, all right, guys, let's go here. Classic gravity. So it was a Frenchman heating chicks in Paris who started hot water heating in a way that got noticed. I'm okay with that because Paris is lovely and a fine place to begin with just about anything. And I do love spicy wings. Here's Jean Simon Bonnemain's hot water system as it appeared in 1777. And look at this illustration. Looks pretty simple. You got the hot water heating system here. It goes up. It looks like this is our return right here. And you see here, this is just what he used to heat up the chicks to make sure that they were comfortable enough to lay eggs. And pretty simple setup, right? Now let's go into detail. Let's see what Dan got to say here. Now this was inside a huge incubator, but we can still see all the elements of what was to come in the gravity system. We have the boiler with a large pipe rising from it to the top of the system. The pipe is relatively large because this system has no circulator. They arrived later on in the 1920s. Larger pipe means less friction to slow the rising hot water. So this is our expansion tank in a way. Remember, this is 1777. So expansion tanks wasn't invented, nor were circulator pumps. But the method was to put in a bigger pipe, which slowed down the pressure, which avoided our relief valve from opening up. Now, guys, he don't talk about this, but I'm pretty sure this boiler has some type of relief. If the boiler pressure got exceeded a certain point, it was going to start leaking water. So it's great to have that there as an expansion tank, even though that's not the name of it. It's great that, like I said, Dan explained exactly how this works. So that's pretty cool. Now, moving along here, near the top of the system, you'll notice a funnel. You guys see that? So this is the expansion tank, and this is the funnel. You'll notice a funnel. That's how you fill the system. The early gravity systems had people climbing stairs with buckets filled with water. Few places had city water mains, and filling a system, as you can imagine, it took a while, especially with those large pipes. So guys, that's another thing to think about here. I don't know how big the system was. And I mean, we're not talking about 10 chicks. It was probably like hundreds of thousands of chicks that the guy had here in the incubator. So I don't even know how long it took to actually fill this whole system up, which is crazy to think about. I know for sure this is definitely something. Remember, he said this is overseas. This is in Paris in 1777. So I doubt that something like this is around now, but it's cool to just understand, like I said, where gravity heating came from. And the fact is, guys, all this is going on without a pump. So how I move my hands like this is just this boiler heating the water up and pressure moving from high to low naturally. Now, I don't know how high this was, because remember, and Dan's going to go over this in the next chapter, with gravity systems, there are limitations that you got to understand, but I don't want to spoil the surprise for you guys. Dan's going to go over this on the next page here. But remember, guys, this isn't steam. This is hot water. So now with steam, you wouldn't need this. You'll just need the sight glass, as you guys will see. But I don't know when steam was invented, but I do know with these gravity setups, this was in people's houses. That's what Dan's going to go over on the next page here. And as you see here, this is what I've seen in Philadelphia. There's about 3 or 4 customers that we go to every winter that still have this setup. You see this here? The only thing you have is a boiler, and you have your 2 supply headers here. You see this? Similar to what I drew on the board. It's a 2-pipe gravity system. So, and then your return is on the bottom. See that? And you guys see the supply from this boiler is not connected. Oh, I'm sorry, the supply from this radiator is not connected to the return from another radiator. It goes on the 2 headers. That's what makes this a 2-pipe system instead of a 1-pipe. And this is a gravity, keyword, a gravity boiler, because this doesn't utilize a circulator pump to move water. It uses gravity. Gravity means you got hot and cold. But guys, this is my last page I'm going to read. I'm going to go over that, how the gravity system works in the house. Now remember, guys, this isn't on a farm. This is in someone's house. This was the farm setup that Dan just talked about on the previous page. But I'm going to resort back to this page a lot, because this is exactly what Dan's talking about here on the gravity boilers. But let's start here first, and we're going to check back in a second. Note 2, the overflow tank at the top. The hot water takes up more space than the cold water. That overflow tank led us to what we call today the expansion tank. Expansion tanks are open to the atmosphere and give the expanded water, once heated, a place to go. The tanks that hang in the basement above the boiler are compression tanks. They have a cushion of air that the heated and expanding water can squeeze to maintain a positive pressure throughout the system. Lots more on that later. And guys, he has another section strictly on expansion tanks. I don't know what section that is, but that might be in the middle of the book. But that's important to understand too, how expansion tanks work. And like I said, he touches on this in this section. But like I said, guys, it's important to know what the purpose of expansion tanks are, and understand that on a closed system, once this boiler turns on and it heats up, the pressure does go up. And like I said, the pressure goes up in a confined system. You're going to need something to combat for that added pressure. So, all right, moving along here. The heating pipes begin heating in the chicks at the top and then lace their way back and forth to the bottom of the system. This would be impossible to zone, as the Soviet Russians later learned when they piped their big apartment building in a similar way. They're still trying to figure out what to do about that one. At the end of the heating pipe enters the boiler at the top and extends to the bottom where cooler water is. This is the same way colder water enters a water heater. It uses a dip tube. Hot water rises, cold water sinks. You know that instinctively. Jean-Simon Bonhomme worked his chicken magic for 15 years, and then the French Revolution happened. He survived that madness, but his business didn't. Few could afford to eat chicken during those tough times. But I'll be thinking about this giant of a hydronic heating industry the next time I'm munching McNuggets. You should too. All right, now this was related to the old incubator, but now we're on the section with the gravity system in someone's house. Let's try it in people's house. Classic gravity heating. is both the simplest and the most complicated system of all. It's simple because it has very few moving parts. The water is the only true moving part. Hot water rises, cold water sinks. It's that simple. But at the same time, it's complicated because the pipes have to be just the right size for the amount of water that's flowing, and they have to have the perfect pitch. The fitter has to make sure to remove the burrs from the pipe he cuts. Otherwise, there can be too much friction presented to the flow. This system is so delicate that a burr can screw you up. Imagine that while you took a look at the draw on the next page. Interesting. So we deal with 1.5 1/4 steam, and with hot water, I think it's like 1 inch. I know it's 3/4 outlets on the radiators. I mean on the baseboards, but based on what the literature said there, and looking at this illustration, look at this. If you cut the pipe and you got a burr inside of it, that could stop the flow of the water to that radiator. And imagine that, guys. You're in someone's house and you ran all this piping, and now guess what? This is all threaded pipe. This isn't soldered. This isn't something you can like quickly fix by like rebrazing or resoldering a joint. Imagine you and like 20 other people completed all this piping to that attic all the way down to the basement. And as soon as you turn the boiler on, you got to redo half of it, because look at this. Hopefully you got unions close to the area, but if you got a burr in the elbow of whoever cut the pipe, didn't make sure they removed all the burrs to make sure that the inside of the pipe is clean, now you got to unthread this whole line and that's if you can tell where the burr is. You know, if it's affecting one radiator, it could affect other radiators too. So yeah, guys, that sounds like a pain in the ass. I'm glad for circulators, that's for sure. All right, let's move it along here. Oh, and notice how the boiler has 2 outlets. These pipes are large. 2 outlets. 2 supplies, 2 returns. The goal is to reduce the resistance to flow so the heated water can rise. Let's make sense of this here. So let's say if our returning supply is 2 inches, we got a 2-inch main, and we probably got a 3/4, this hypothetically speaking. Our dual supplies and dual returns are probably 2-inch black pipe, and it's probably a 2 by 2 by 3/4 T. And since we don't have a circulator pump, maybe the ideology behind this is that bigger pipes coming out the boiler going to a smaller branch, meaning the trunks is the header, branch is the hits going to the radiators. Maybe by reducing the piping down flow, that can cause the water pressure to go up. Maybe, I don't know. All right. The goal is to reduce the resistance to flow so the heated water can rise. 2 pipes and the big ones allow for more flow, and that's why you'll see these multiple tappings on these classic systems. I think I got the picture somewhere in my phone, but yeah, this guy definitely did have an operating 2-pipe gravity boiler. I did see this in Philly, so you guys probably did already see a few of these out here. Also, you're limited to a building no taller than 3 stories because one of the Delta sisters, in this case, Delta T, the hot water rises and gives up its heat to the radiators. Beyond 3 stories, the hot water pretty much stops rising because the water has lost so much of its heat. These systems work by the difference in density between the hot water and the cold water. It's like a helium balloon. It will just keep going up so high and then it will stop rising. So here's a good question for you. As long as we're talking about helium balloons, if you're rising from the boiler, which floor would you heat up first? Okay, that's a good question. Look at this, guys. If me and you, we're inside this boiler, we're hot water and we're flowing, and this is 3 levels. Boiler's in the basement, 1st floor, 2nd floor, 3rd floor. Which radiator will likely be heated up first? Is it the 1st floor, 2nd floor, 3rd floor? Now, before reading this book, guys, I already know the answer, but I want to know what you guys think. I'm gonna read this question again. If you were rising from the boiler, which floor would you head for first? Meaning, which floor? Remember, basement is where the boiler is at. First floor, you got 3 radiators. Second floor, you got 3. And then on the third floor, I'm assuming maybe the attic, you have another 3 radiators. So if you turn this boiler on, which floor essentially is going to get hot first? Dun, no, 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 dun, 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 dun. You guys got the answer yet? Good. The answer is none of them because this boiler doesn't have electric going to it. So it's like, nah. Guys, I'm going to let him tell you the answer, but I originally thought how I would usually think if a boiler had a circulator pump, which floor would get hot first. But let Dan tell you the answer. Would you go to the first floor, the second floor, or the third floor? Think it over. I'll wait. When I first read this book, I'm thinking the first floor, but that's wrong. Did you say the first floor? Well, if you had a circulator pump on the system, the water would go to the first floor first. That's because water is lazy and will always follow the path of least resistance. With the circulator, the path of least resistance is the shortest run from the circulator's discharge to its suction. In this case, that's the first floor radiators. With the circulator on the job, most of the heat is going to go to the first floor, which is what my mind was primed to think. But without a circulator, the path of least resistance is the top floor. Think a helium balloon. Helium balloon. This floor would get hot first. The water climbs the pipe, bypassing the first and second floor radiators. That means there are unhappy people in this house because all because of the other delta sister, the delta P. There's less difference in pressure between the boiler and the top of these old systems than there is between the boiler and the first and second floor radiators. It's a dead man thing. They piped the job that way. And when they did something that they never wrote down because they weren't thinking about us in the 21st century, boo-hoo. So guys, to sum it up, water, just like circulator pumps, is going to follow the path of least resistance. But you got to understand, guys, you can't think like a circulator pump because this boiler doesn't have a circulator pump. To sum it up, you got to understand the two sisters, delta P and delta T. Guys, you got to understand, I don't know how these two sisters look. They might be ugly as hell. They may be pretty, but you got to understand what makes one different from the other. Guys, you got temperature difference and you got pressure difference, right? But you got to understand, we're talking about delta P. Hold on. So we're talking about delta P. So I pretty much blew this up from the page. I got tired of holding the book up to show you guys the picture. So check it out. What we have here, we just have 6 radiators. We got the same thing. We got a 2-pipe gravity boiler. As you see, our 2 supplies on top. Follow the red arrows. It's hitting all 6 radiators on the supply side. And the return pipes, which is on the outer end, they're both going back and it gets preheated and then that's it. Now guys, I'm going to read this passage one more time, the last 2 lines, because this is important, right? It says, yada, yada, yada. That means there are unhappy people in this house, all because of the other sister. Delta P, pressure difference. And pay attention, guys. I'm going to sum this up very, very simple. All because of the other sister, delta P. There's less pressure difference in between the boiler and the top of these old, keyword old systems than there is between the boiler and the first and second floor. It's a dead man thing. And you want to know why? They piped it that way. Now, guys, remember, pressure moves from high to low. But you got to understand, Dan said this earlier, pressure difference is what creates flow. Remember, there is no circulator. With a circulator pump, the first floor, and I didn't draw this up this way. Hold on. That's why it looks a little wacky. Hold on. Third, second, first, basement. All right. This is going to help you guys out. Help you see this a lot better here. Check it out. With a circulator pump, the first floor is automatically going to get hot the quickest because that's the shortest run from the supply of the circulator to the return of the circulator. So anything that's on the first floor with a hydronic system with a circulator pump is going to get heat first and the quickest. But since we don't have the luxury of having a circulator pump, since it wasn't invented yet, you got to understand how they pipe the system. And let's say hypothetically speaking, guys, if we got a 2-inch main coming off this boiler, if the piping on the third floor radiator is closer in size to our supply and return mains, and like I said, guys, this is hypothetically, let's say quarter, 3/4, 3/4, inch and a quarter, 3/4. And this is just hypothetically, guys. I just want to show you how water flows here. So check it out. Coming off our boiler is 2-inch. And based on our knowledge of what Dan said with Delta P, what he just told us is that water is lazy. So if it's going to take the water less energy and less time to flow from 2 to 1.25 inches, why wouldn't the water go to that whatever is connected to the 1.25 inches? Because, guys, it's going to take a lot more resistance and a lot more work for water to squeeze from a 2-inch down to a 3/4, which is what we have on our first floor and our second floor. But going from 2 to 1.25 inches in relativity to 3/4 is not that bad. Remember, guys, like I said, I never seen a radiator with 2-inch piping coming off it. That's why I had to read that again. And like I said, guys, I feel like I learned something new every single time I look at this book. But like I said, guys, just based on pressure, you have to pipe this system a certain way to get heat to certain levels before others. Because, guys, without a circulator pump, if we made all the piping the same size, this house, the heat never would have worked properly. The first floor probably would have been comfortable, but the third floor would be ice cold. Because without, like I said, that circulator pump, you have to rely on the piping size, and you have to pipe the boiler the right way to get heat up to the higher levels. So I hope this makes sense, guys. They probably put bigger piping. I use 1.25 inches, kind of like as a quick illustration. 2-inch coming out the boiler, 1.25 inches going to our third floor radiators, and only 3/4 going to our second and first. So in theory, if the boiler runs, third floor is going to get hot first, and then it trickles down to second and first. So that's what he meant by dead man's piping. And they piped it that way. That's why that's the case. Now, guys, long term, here's the issue, right, that you guys will see. Long term, and let's say if this is like a boiler in someone's house right now, if they get the boiler replaced with a brand new boiler, most brand new boilers now, you don't have brand new gravity boilers. All boilers now, brand new, you're going to have a circulator pump. So I know what you're thinking. If I replace this boiler, do I have to replace the piping to match 3/4? And guys, the answer is going to be no, because reason being, with a circulator pump, that first floor is automatically going to get hot first. And with bigger piping upstairs, that really doesn't matter with a circulator pump, because you got to remember with a circulator pump, granted, if you have enough water in the system, and also you may have to change that expansion tank, because guys, the illustration he showed in the picture here, I had to do this once. This had to be like at least 6 years ago. This customer had one of these in their closet, and this is an open style expansion tank. We had to cut the pipe, cap it, and we put a bladder style expansion tank downstairs. I think it was a 30 PSI tank. But like I said, guys, I definitely did see this before, which is cool. Like I said, I can use this book as reference. But at that time, like I said, I knew some older houses, they actually taught us this in trade school. When our old teachers is telling us about expansion tanks, he, like I said, and Dan does this too in this book, which is a great reference for you guys. But I knew anytime I see this on an older system that we had to replace, always cut this off and cap it. And like I said, put the new expansion tank downstairs. But guys, I definitely seen this setup before. And like I said, I never had to change the piping. So I don't think you have to. But like I said, guys, unless there was like some remodification work going on, you know, if the customers were moving some radiators, maybe you'll have to change it. Depends on, like I said, where the new location is going to be. But like I said, guys, I never had to change it. And like I said, guys, you're not going to have 1.25-inch piping going to a radiator. I just use that as a reference. But this is what they had to do. This is exactly how they had to pipe it back in the day to get hot water on the 3rd floor without a circulator pump. Now, guys, I think this is very ingenious, like I said, back in the day. And I know most of the piping from back in the day are still inside people's homes. Even though the system is new, the setup is probably still the same from back in the day. So that's what I was telling you guys. Like I said, you know, you definitely want to respect these older systems, because in these older houses, the setup is still the same, and most customers won't know about something like this until after something breaks. So that's why I recommend you guys to brush up on your history and know what came before you. Like I said, if you guys do have someone that was alive back in that day in the trades, you know, try to soak as much game as you can from him or her, whoever that was. But like I said, for you guys that are in my shoes, if you didn't have that experience from 40 years ago, Dan Holohan is definitely going to be your go-to. Like I said, this book is only $25. And like I said, I only went over like, what, maybe 2 chapters. And guys, like I said, this is close to 20 grand. I'll say 25 grand in boiler game. So like I said, me personally, you know, I don't pick and choose. Like I said, I feel like hydronics, heat pumps, furnaces, you name it. Everything has its unpleasantries you got to deal with. But like I said, guys, once you understand and you have a good base level of how things work, it only helps you out, you know. I don't know anyone that took the time to understand hydronics, you know, still complaining about, hey, you know, I wish it wasn't like this. I mean, it is what it is, guys. Like I said, you know, there's no perfect way of doing anything. Like I said, guys, once you understand the gist of how equipment is supposed to work and how everything comes together, this stuff only helps you out. Because like I said, guys, what I'm telling you guys right now and what you're seeing, it's not going to be this correct inside people's homes. It's not going to be everything together. You know, if you're in a 4-level house, you can't zoom out and see this. You know, you have to understand in the back of your mind already what's supposed to be where. So like I said, guys, take this day by day. And like I said, you know, you don't have to read this book, like I said, from start to cover in 24 hours. You know, it took me, because I was still, like I said, I bought this book 2 summers ago, and I try to read at least maybe 1 chapter a week. And like I said, you know, whenever I got done work, you know, I just popped this book open. I took, you know, I dissected each and every chapter. So I didn't have to write diagrams like this, because I already knew what he was talking about from me seeing this before. But like I said, guys, like Dan, I like his illustration, and I like how he talks here. Like I said, it's not all technical shit that you got to use a dictionary to define every other word he talks about. Like I said, you can tell he already been around this, but he talks in a very simple tone, and like I say, he uses pictures. And like I said, guys, you know, there's no way you can not make money and not understand hydronics after reading this book. So, and guys, like I said, I knew about steam. I knew he made a book with steam. I got to get my hands on that one. But like I said, this is the only one I had from him. And I actually went to one of his classes back in the day. I think he had a class over in Jersey. He had a hydronic class, but I didn't know what the hell hydronics was. So I remember his last name, but I don't remember. He was talking about, like I said, putting circulator on the supply. That's the only thing I remember he was talking about. But guys, that was like when I was still doing maintenance. So everything comes back around full circle. You're going to hear me say that a lot. I'm definitely grateful that, you know, I stuck around it long enough. And like I said, shout out to Dan. Definitely appreciate him, all the wisdom and knowledge that he put inside these books. But guys, I got to get up out of here. I'll let y'all screen shoot this. Take a picture of it. And I got to erase the board, and I got to get going. You guys enjoy the weekend. I'll see y'all in the next one. Bye.